Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the webinar of Interpol together with Onfido. How do you tackle 3D fraud in the 2D world? Before we start, all the attendees are in silence mode. If you go to the control panel of GoToWebinar, you see a box with questions. If you have any questions during the webinar or after the webinar, please put all your questions in the box over there, and we have people in the background handling all your questions. Now, I think everyone, we can start. It's a 1-hour session today. We want to provide you with a presentation of about 25 to 30 minutes, where we discuss different topics, and after that we have about 30 minutes left to have a more open discussion with all the different panelists. So a short introduction, who we are, what we do, and yeah, the different teams. Before we start, I'm very happy that Interpol is willing to join this webinar. Since last year, we have established a partnership to work together in the field of document authentication. Who am I? I'm Michael Van Gestel, the global head of fraud at Onfido for the past 3 years now. Before I joined the company, I worked for several other online identity verification providers. And actually started my career about 20 years ago, working for the Dutch government, started at border control, checking identity documents. And over the years, I did my studies and education, and eventually ended up at Onfido, where we check identity documents in an online environment. Dimi.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, my name is Dimitri. I'm one of the document specialists here at Onfido. My background has been roughly 6 years in the world of identity and identity fraud, and I've started with the initial business that Onfido had, which was pre-employment screening. Here at Onfido, I look after the training that we do with the computer research teams to improve models and algorithms that we build to detect document fraud. Thank you.
So I suppose that's me then. So I'm Simon Horswell. I've been with Onfido for nearly 2 years now. Similar kind of background to Michael, except in the UK as opposed to the Netherlands, because that's just where we live, isn't it? So seemingly about 20 years or so ago, I started in border control, worked my way into the expert center, and then after having spent probably about 10 years in immigration and border control, I moved into the private sector and started working with a forensic manufacturer, where I'd spent the next 7 or so years before finally coming here and taking all of that knowledge of 3D examination and imaging documents in a 3D world and then turning it into a 2D environment. So if I'll pass it over now to our colleagues at Interpol to introduce themselves, that'd be lovely.
Thank you, Simon. My name is Daniela Djidrovska, and I'm assigned to Interpol's Counterfeit Currency Security Documents branch as a coordinator. I have more than 20 years also experience in police environment, and also experience by working with various international organizations, such as International Organization of United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, as well as Interpol when I joined back 2005. And my background is specifically linked to forensic chemistry.
Hello, my name is Malik, Alibegovic, and I'm forensic analyst with Counterfeit Currency and Security Documents branch here at Interpol for the past 15 years. Prior to that, I was in private sector within security printing industry. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you, Malik. So why does Interpol today Onfido together with Interpol? Now, there's one big reason, and you will notice during the presentation, Interpol has a very extensive background in checking identity documents in a physical environment, and we call that the 3D environment, where Onfido is focused on checking that same identity document in a 2D environment, in that online environment. And yeah, we know each other for quite a long time, and we started a conversation again And then we just said, yeah, why don't combine those forces, combine our knowledge of that 2D document checking together with checking that identity document in that physical environment, and come up with, yeah, with better solutions, come up with training sessions, and try to educate our clients, but also try to educate governments that they need to think in both directions. So for the people who don't know who Onfido is, yeah, the Onfido solution is hidden in the trip of the customer. When you want to get a mortgage online, when you want to open a bank account, when you want to rent a car, and somewhere in that process you need to present your identity document in an online environment, Onfido is behind that, and yeah, to do the authentication on your identity document. That's a very, very high level overview without going in too much detail. And as mentioned, we are in the online environment. Interpol comes from the 3D, from the physical environment, and that's the complete reason why we are here together today. So in the introduction, you saw Simon, Demi, and myself. We are heading the document specialist team within the company. We are the fraud experts when it comes to identity documents. And what do we do on a daily basis? One thing is document onboarding. As you can imagine, we have 195 different countries. All the countries issue various of identity documents with different designs, different security features. And we want to know what is hidden in that identity document and make the translation from that physical environment into that online environment. Another thing we do quite a lot is reviewing the macro fraud trends. It's just searching the internet, the dark web, the light web, what is happening in the world of fraud. And if you know what they do and how they do it, and as long as you know that, then you know how to tackle the problem. Another big part of our daily job is training and presenting. Yeah, what we're doing here. Normally it's more face-to-face trainings and face-to-face presentations, where we are trying to share our gained knowledge in the authentication of documents in that online environment.
For us at Interpol, one of our main concerns is that criminals and terrorists frequently use fraudulent documents, both fake and genuine identity and travel documents, in order to carry out their illegal activities. They also use genuine documents used by imposters, or at the more dangerous level, fraudulent obtained genuine documents. Our mission here at Interpol is to enable member countries, 194 member countries, to target and disrupt transnational criminal networks, and to identify, analyze, and respond to emerging criminal threats. In our quest to address different threats and risks posed by document fraud, we conduct the forensic analysis of documents, issue different tools such as notices and alerts, and also make the relevant databases available to the competent authorities in our member countries. Over the years, we have increasingly been involved in training and capacity building by delivering training activities, often in collaboration with private sector, such as in this instance with Onfido, but also providing different fora where we enable our colleagues, experts, and officers working in this arena to share their knowledge and to really facilitate expertise exchange between experts in our member countries. Next slide, please. For those that might not know, Interpol was created in 1923 and is currently the world's largest international police organization. We provide secure police communication network and infrastructure, as well as the relevant services to enable cross-border police cooperation, support and assist all organizations and authorities whose mission is to prevent or combat international organized crime. Each of our 194 member countries has its own national central bureau. A network of these bureaus is really the foundations of international police cooperation for the most part. Next slide, Michael, please. Our organizational operating model is focused on 3 priority crime programs, as you can see on the outer ring. Counterterrorism, for obvious reasons, of course, organized and emerging crime, and increasingly and more dominantly, cybercrime. Our strategy identifies objectives derived from Interpol's global policing capabilities and support functions for law enforcement, whether it's police data management, criminal intelligence analysis, training, capacity building, or border security, forensic support, investigative support. As you can appreciate, almost all of these involve identity and travel document fraud in some form, including counterfeit and forged documents, as well as fraudulently used genuine in some instances. Next slide, please.
Okay, so now I would like to say something about our branch where Malik and I work for. So we work for Counterfeit Currency Security Documents branch, and this unit belongs to Criminal Network Sub-Directorate. And our mandates are to establish programs that provide forensic support, operational assistance, and technical databases in order to assist all 194 Interpol member countries regarding counterfeit currency, security documents, as well as border security issues. Also, our branch provides a platform for governmental authorities to partner with industry leaders in order to address global threats to the security of countries and their citizens caused and facilitated by criminal activities involving false and fraudulent identity and travel documents. So I would like to, if we go to the next slide, I would like to present some of our products. Next slide, please. Hello.
Yes.
Okay, so now I would like to say something. No, the previous one. Previous one. Okay, so now in this slide you see most of our products developed so far in cooperation not only with law enforcement entities but also with various international organizations and the private sector. So in particular with United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, we were able to develop a guideline titled Introduction to Security Document Examination, Trainer Program and Trainer's Guide. And also based on this guideline, we were able to deliver a number of train-the-trainer courses around the world, most of them jointly delivered with our trusted private partners. Also, we were able so far to develop a number of e-learning modules. You see here e-learning module on security document examination. So this particular e-learning module has been jointly developed with the US Department of State, and this module is available on 4 organizational languages. So you can find it in English, French, Arabic, and Spanish language. I have to mention that it is only available for law enforcement use and is for restricted use. So those attendees today who do belong to law enforcement, they are able to take the module in all, in language they wish to do it. And in the end of the day, they can download the content of the module itself and also to download certificate of their attendance. We were also able to run with number of scientific research programs, in particular to inks analysis, age of ink, and ink, in particular forensic examinations. And this publication is titled Physical Chemical Study on Cross-Line Intersection, and you can download this guideline on our public Interpol website. It is for public use. And I would like to mention in particular our cooperation with private sector, in particular to Onfido and to this instance. So with our partners, we were able to deliver training in Philippines last year for the benefits of 25 border control officers and immigration officials in Asia countries. If we move to the next slide, please. So here you can see where we were in particular present last 5 years, and we are proud that we were able to gather so far 80 Interpol member countries, approximately 2,000 officials from border control and immigration. They were able to attend these training courses jointly delivered with the private sector. So next slide, please. And here I would like just once again to say thanks to our partners from Onfido, to their technical and as well as financial support, their expertise. And they made possible a training course in Manila, Philippines last year for the benefits of 5 Interpol member countries. So you can see more on Interpol public web pages about this particular training course, and also to find out more about our responsibilities and activities currently running at our unit. Next slide, please.
Today's crimes are increasingly complex. It's a truism, but it has to be mentioned. They are interconnected and global, and they take place in both physical and virtual levels. And this is where 3D meets 2D in many instances, not only in our domain of security documents. More than ever, there is a need for multilateral police cooperation to address these security challenges affecting the security of our societies. But it's more about collaborative effort, not only between public forces, but private and public, of which we will tell more in the slides to follow. Next slide, please. However, where we are now, as Michael introduced us, we are very much in 3D environment. So there is a quick glance at Interpol's Counterfeit Currency and Security Documents Lab. And from here, we are able to provide investigative and operational assistance to our member countries. We contribute to Interpol's global policing capabilities. These are some of the critical tools. Interpol's Stolen and Lost Travel Documents database, in which we act as a supportive unit, as well as a dial-doc platform. I'll just mention briefly, because it's probably the sharpest tool in our toolbox. Interpol's Stolen and Lost Travel Documents database has more than 80 million records and enables officers at border to determine in seconds if suspect travel document has been reported lost and stolen. So it's just a segment, one segment of what IT can do. In this instance, it's identifying lost and stolen, but it's certainly something that has proven very useful in combating organized crime. Next slide, please. I think this we conclude.
Yeah, thank you, Daniela and Malik, for the introduction. Some other topics we want to highlight today. We want to touch on today. It's the best practice for assessing 3D documents in a 2D world. So yeah, how to check that physical document in an online environment. What identity management needs to consider for the future. What else can be done to ensure the best assessment of these 2D captured documents, and a very interesting one, and that's why we want to use some of the time of this webinar as well to start a discussion of what do we think the future holds. And I think when we would ask it to Interpol or Onfido, we both have different thoughts around that. So to start off with the best practice for assessing that physical document in this online environment. Yeah, what do we have left to examine? That's what we always say. That's the challenge. Yeah, as mentioned, Simon and myself come from a physical background. We were sitting at the border checking that physical identity document, and we could play with that document. You could tilt it, you could turn it around, and you saw some nice color shifting, and you saw some of the security features moving and changing color. And now we only have that white light image statically on a screen. On a physical identity document, we can have over 30 to 40 different security features. What we are doing with Simon and Dimi within the document specialist team, we want to be that bridge in the translation of that physical document into that 2D environment. And we always say, and that's the challenge, we're not talking about 40 security features anymore, but we're talking about 5 to 10 indicators. The way of checking that identity document online it's completely different than checking that document in a physical environment. What we always say, the document areas of focus, you need to segment the document. That's physically, but it's also online. And segment the document into small areas and check those areas in isolation. And we always say you can't perform a good check without reference material. You always need a reference image or a reference document to say something about the authenticity of the document you check. And you can't know all the features of 4,500 different identity documents. But when you use the same systematics, when you check that identity document, it will make your life a little bit more easy. Talking about the segmentation of documents, we always talk about the big five in identity checking. When you have that identity document in front of you, we always say, focus on the photo area, focus on the name, the date of birth, date of expiry / date of issue, and the document number. And if you build your solution around those big five and you perform your checks around those big five, it will become way more easier to identify those fraudulent cases. Here is just an idea of the segmentation of a document. And we check the photo, the number one, we can check the header of this document. We can look at the personalization section. We can look at the section of the machine readable zone, those 2 lines in the bottom of your identity document. And do consistency checks, do validation checks, calculations. And these checks become very crucial when you check a document in that online environment. So what identity management needs to consider for the future, Dimi?
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic. To start to think about the future, we need to start to think about where we are today. And the truth of the matter is, currently, there are largely 2 ways that most organizations deal with identity management. So one way is in person, which means it's similar to what happens with the world of going through a border, where a officer would check your document. Obviously, we know that that has its own challenges, where it's not exactly scalable, and it's quite time consuming, and sometimes it creates an unpleasant experience for the user having to go through this process and having to queue for a long while. The obverse of this type of interaction would be the non-person interaction, where a user would submit some of their personal data, and that would be searched through a specific type of database. Now, naturally, this has some of its other inconveniences that is caused by things like data hacks or breaches, where a lot of personal information is now available in the public domain, and even more so on the dark net. I think we were reading some statistics that blocks of identity data are being sold at 1,000 sets of identities for close to $400. So that means 40 cents for a name, date of birth, address, SSN number, postcode, CVV number, everything you need to basically create an account almost anywhere. So what this means is these locks are largely outdated. These database checks either facilitate the prevalence of fraud, or they block access to some 2 billion people, which are thin thin credit or no credit file, people that don't have access to conventional methods of verifying their PII against the database. So what do we think that this leads into? Well, it definitely highlights some of the problems that we're trying to solve. If you go to the next slide, please. And I think Onfido sees that there are 4 core pillars that need to be addressed when we're talking about identity in the digital and the online world. These 4 pillars are security. Obviously, you need to make sure that you are dealing with problems accordingly. Convenience, where you don't put too many roadblocks in the front of people that probably couldn't jump through all of those hoops. But also being mindful of the user experience, of how much data they're sharing and so on. access. So again, making sure that the widest number of your user base gets access to the services that you provide. And finally, privacy, where we're all very conscious that we live in a digital world, and now almost anything that you do online, any form of activity, will leave a trace somewhere. Now, there are browsers that send, the do not track me kind of options, but let's be like quite frank, that doesn't really work the way we think it does. So what do we think that these 4 pillars mean? They're all somewhat in tension to each other. Obviously, security and privacy, you would sometimes need to give up one in favor of the other. Convenience versus access. It's really hard to give access to everyone and also make it convenient. But this is something that we think is really important, and that's why Onfido is in this space. It's a hard problem to solve, but we think we've got the right tools for it. We go to the next slide, please. How do we think we would do that? Well, we can think about best practices. What are the best practices to try and circumvent some of these challenges which are in tension to each other? So what do we do to test that we can do the best assessment of an image? Well, the first thing that we wanted to suggest is to control the capture of an image. So think of this as a form of chain of custody in the legal world. You need to have an uninterrupted chain of custody. This is how you can maintain the chain of custody between the user that's providing the document that they have and the camera or the device that you're using to capture that image. So by preventing the upload of a file that you may have generated with a different device or on a computer, you block some of the bad actors from interfering with that stream and potentially editing a file or hijacking a data stream and injecting some false information in there. Secondly, you want to verify all of the machine readable features that you can, such as Michael mentioned, the 2 lines of MRZ at the bottom of a passport or 3 lines on the back of an ID card, the chip that's embedded into documents where you can authenticate that chip. We know not all countries publish the chip certificates, so that sometimes is difficult. And because most cameras don't work with infrared or ultraviolet sensors, which are honestly a good proportion of the arsenal of security features, you need to authenticate everything you can in white light. That means looking at specific fonts, that means looking at specific print patterns and some other, let's say, features which are part of the Onfido secret sauce of how we check documents. Now, if we go to the next slide, please. All of these features that I've mentioned, they're all quite complicated and convoluted. So it takes quite some time for someone to be able to assess all of them in isolation and then compare them with an original document, as Michael mentioned in the earlier slide. So how do we do that at Onfido at scale so that we provide the access that users need? Well, we leverage something that we call the hybrid approach, which is based on our machine learning algorithms. So this is where we leverage the human intelligence. Humans are really good at understanding complex tasks and breaking them down, and then explain, so to speak, those tasks to different systems, the automated systems that perform those checks in isolation, and then they compound the answers to each one of those checks into a final output. So what this graph highlights is that over time, when a new document enters into circulation or when a new type of fraud is seen, at the very beginning, human performance will be the part that does the heaviest of lifting, and they'll have to understand that the processes that we were describing earlier. And then based on that, we would start to train algorithms that would perform each one of these calculations in isolation to compute them. And we can see that over time, the human performance gets overshot by automated performance, because we train one specific algorithm to do a specific task, and then we optimize for it as much as we can. So that means that while in the beginning the humans do the most of the work, once that work has been understood and transformed into something that a computer can perform, then the computers will do the majority of the work, with humans only stepping in the exception cases where a computer can't yet make a decision. That means we over time train to become much better. Thank you. now I'll pass it on back to Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Demi. Before we continue to the next topic, what the future holds and how we see the future, I'm actually quite interested in some additional information from Interpol. We were discussing the challenges we are facing in the translation from that physical document towards a 2D environment. What kind of challenges are you facing? Do you have anything in addition as what we just discussed?
Maybe it's not a perfect moment, but there is something that is rather important as a challenge, maybe not directly to documents themselves, but to the issue of identity. We are now in 2020, and according to UNICEF, there are 40 million births unregistered every year at this day, at this age. So that's certainly something that gives us concern.
Yeah, and then look at 40 million you mentioned. Yeah, 40 million unregistered, and what happens in the future? Sometimes we also talk about fraudulently obtained genuine documents, for example. That's a nice type of fraud, which is pretty difficult to catch. That you receive an original document based on a fake birth certificate, for example. Now, with what you're stating, these numbers are 40 million. Yeah, then you can imagine what's happening worldwide. It's not only in the physical environment, Interpol's environment, but later on, when they want to open that account or rent that car, we will face the same problems. It's anything else in addition, Simon or Dimi or Daniela? Sorry.
Well, I just wanted to add, when you mentioned fraudulently obtained documents, in particular, recently we are facing with other challenge with fraudulently obtained visas. So when you compare a number of cases of visa fraud and counterfeit documents, then we were able to assess that more than 90,000 cases reflected visa fraud rather than counterfeit document cases in between 2017 to 2019. So, and which is also important, all these cases were detected by non-law enforcement authorities, which is also interesting and important for us to know, and affects mostly external borders. So that might be next topic of discussion.
The next topic of discussion, yeah, we can provide a new webinar around the topic of traveling and fake visas. That's another interesting topic. Yeah. Thank you. Let's go to the next topic. What we think the future holds, and this is a quite interesting one. We as an online provider think about the future in really that online solution, and Interpol can think about the future in that more physical solution. And how can we bring that more together? Simon.
Well, I'm glad you've asked me, Michael. Thank you very much. So really, there's a couple of points that I think we should address here. So I'll come to the first one. It makes more sense to do it in that order. So what we could talk about is the fact that with identity, when you're creating an identity online, you have like a digital presence. Every time you sign up with a new provider or a new vendor, let's say I want to open a bank account. I want to open a bank account with another branch as well, or with another bank. I want to hire a car. Every time I do that, at the moment under the current system, what happens is you're creating a new digital account, a new digital login each time. They're not tied together. And this means that multiple times you have to have your identity verified and then verified again, and so on. And as Dimi was talking about earlier, there are problems with holding this information together, creating these big databases, because they just create honeypots. They create massive targets for hackers, because as we all know, that data is incredibly important. It's valuable. So one of the things that we've been talking about on Fido as a way forward from this is to create what we're calling a portable identity. So this is a potential way out of some of these issues. If you can click on the next slide for me, please. So rather than just having multiple cases of creating an account, The first time you're encountered, whoever it is with, you create your digital identity. You log in, you create an account as you would in the normal way, but rather than it just being housed with one provider, you own it. It becomes your own property. You own your digital identity. So it's kept somewhere safe in a virtual place. It doesn't go into a database. It isn't housed with everybody else's information. It's yours. You own it. So once you've had your bona fides established, you've had your identity authenticated and verified by use of any number of identity documents, connecting that with you as a person by the use of selfie or video or other biometrics, you then have a digital presence that you own. If you can click on the next slide, please. So the idea is then you will gain access to this the next time it's required. So if I then want to go and sign up for healthcare somewhere, or I want to do a bank transfer or money transfer with one of these other vendors, I don't have to create a new digital presence each time. I'm not having multiple attempts and putting myself at greater risk and my privacy at greater risk as an end user. I've got my identity and it's safe. And I can allow these different vendors and these different consumers to come and take what parts of it, but only the parts of it that they actually need. So I'm not giving them all of my PII data. I'm not exposing myself in that way. They're only taking from it what they actually need to complete the task that I'm asking them to provide. And I can verify that I am indeed the person that is genuinely in possession of this digital identity by a very quick re-authentication, which is normally going to be something like a selfie or a video, just to confirm that I am the person that is contained within this digital identity that I'm allowing the vendor access to. So that immediately is making everything much safer. We're not having a big warehouse of data. We're not having it in multiple places. I own my own data. It's separate from your data. It's separate from everybody else's data. There's no treasure trove for the hacker to go and find. If you click on the next slide, please. So that's one of our ideas. The other thing that we see is vitally important, and this, this relates exactly to today, is stronger partnerships between private industry and public institutions, or with government organisations or authorities. More and more, we're looking at the private sector and we're allowing this level of trust. We work at Onfido. Onfido is a private company, and we are managing people's data. We're processing people's data, and with that comes a great wealth of responsibility to handle it safely and carefully and securely. But at the same time, the onus is also on us to make sure that we're authenticating people correctly, so that we're protecting the good users and we're protecting the vendors that are providing services as well. Now, to do that properly, we kind of need to have that partnership with government so that we are allowed access to certain information, not too sensitive, obviously. We're still private industry. We're not working in government, but certainly a level of trust has to be there so that we can access certain things that would verify these people. Because as we've talked about this entire presentation, it's getting harder and harder. The fraudsters are getting smarter and smarter. They're able to produce effective ways of circumventing more traditional ways of authenticating a person that any of us are able to access. If it's in the public domain, that kind of means it's in the fraudster's domain to access and see it as well, and then reverse engineer or circumvent or figure a way around. So a stronger partnership, a better understanding between the public institutions and the private institutions is definitely the way forward. I mean, we see this as well with different government projects where governments understand that they might not necessarily have the resources to focus have as much of a concentrated focus on these particular areas of problems that private industry does. You can have a number of companies that are working towards providing a solution for just one small area of the problem. Now, for government, you just don't have the resources to do that. So it makes sense that these partnerships are working two ways. And that between the two of them, we're going to come up with a much stronger solution that protects everybody. And that certainly, in my mind, to Onfido's mind, is the way forward. But again, sorry to throw you guys back under the spotlight. I'd put it back to Interpol as well. I think we're all keen to sort of hear how you feel the future looks as well. I mean, this to me seems a good idea. We can see that you guys do as well. But what else do you think the future has in store?
The future.
So we may suggest a few recommendations for future. So to bring together the law enforcement community and private industry and develop a forum for exchange of ideas and information in 3D and 2D environment. To increase in international cooperation and deploy training tools, including e-learning products, and to ensure widest possible knowledge of the assessment and detection of fraudulent documents by frontline law enforcement officials. And considering human factor is still very much important in detection fraudulent documents, so we strongly suggest the maintenance of both physical and digital identity registration when you have document in hand and also in the database, and to support the verification and use of security documents. That would be recommendations from Interpol.
Thank you, Daniela and Malik. Yeah, as we mentioned it before as well, training tools, e-learning, especially the stronger partnership between private and public institutions. Yeah, as Simon mentioned and as you mentioned as well. I come from the background of working for the government, and it was 20 years ago. And at that point in time, it was almost impossible to work together with private organizations. And what we have seen over the past 20 years, it goes slowly, but luckily it's happening now. And I always say, if we want to tackle this problem of fraud and we want to catch the fraudsters, we need to cooperate, we need to share information. Otherwise, they will always find a way to manage. If it's not on the governmental side, it will be on the private side. So, and I think a good point that you made is the physical registration as well as digital registration. Sometimes we get a question: will everything goes digitally? And will the physical document disappear? It's the same question: will money disappear, physical money, or are we only using our cards? I don't believe it will disappear soon. Somewhere in the future it will, but that's purely my opinion. There is too much money going on in the industry, and to give one nice example, those 2 lines of machine readable zone, we mentioned it a couple of times, what you see in the bottom of a passport, it took them 35 years to implement this worldwide. Now we are talking about electronic documents, we are talking about chips, we are talking about NFC. It's nice for the more wealthy countries. It's pretty expensive, and it will take some time for this to be implemented worldwide in a good way. Some of the insights and take. Sorry, Simon. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say the counterpoint to that is I agree with you there, but I think at the same time, what you've seen happen is as time's gone on, that whole process has sped up a lot more. So yeah, it took 35 years to implement the machine readable zone. The biometric passport was a much quicker process. That's come into force a lot more quickly. Again, now every country that's getting a new passport, they are looking to get an e-passport. So again, it's getting quicker and quicker. And I think it's the fact that now we are far more connected as a society, as a globe. And people are aware of the fact that if I need to protect my borders, I need to help you protect your borders. If I want my services to be secure, I have to make sure that your registration processes means that I can trust your documents as well. So we're starting to see this change. And yeah, I think it will take time, of course, but I think it's getting quicker and quicker because all of the stakeholders are understanding the fact that you can't just look after yourself. You have to think of the bigger picture, and everybody has to come with you. This is why you have so many projects that take place where one country helps to sponsor another country's passport acquisition process or set up an identity card system in another country. It's all part of this understanding that you need to share so that we all end up in a better place.
Yeah, I agree with you there as well. Due to time, let's go to the insights and takeaways, and then we can take a couple of questions because the questions are coming in as well, and we want to try and answer most of them. Our insights and takeaways, yeah, examination of a document in an online environment, it's challenging, more challenging than checking it in a physical environment. Let's say there are different challenges in both directions. As Dimi mentioned, identity underpins every transactions. We want stronger partnerships in the future between governmental and non-governmental organizations. And then we heard the recommendations from Interpol about training, about the digital and in combination with physical registration, work together and combine that knowledge of 3D and 2D. Do you have anything to add here, Daniela?
No, I think you've conveyed what we already mentioned. The need to learn, the need to teach, the need to train.
Education, and education is the key word. It's for the people who are checking the identity documents, but also for the companies and governments who are doing businesses online, who are producing the documents. They need to know what's happening, and they need to know how fraudsters are attacking documents, for example. This was the part of the presentation. It took a little bit longer than expected, but I see some questions coming in. So thank you for your input here on the slides, and then I will jump to the questions. Let's see. Okay. This is a nice one for Dimi, I think. How do you tackle computer-generated document fraud, like deepfakes? Fakes, but for documents.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I think that's a really good question. And to give a bit of context, yes, we've seen that a lot of fraudsters are now organizing themselves in forums, and they're sharing the fake documents that they make. They're sharing the vulnerabilities that they discover. So that makes the collaboration that we can do on our side that much more important. To answer your question directly, the way that you can block or at least try to prevent computer-generated images from going through in your system is by controlling the captcha. So you can use something like an SDK, which would then perform some device analytics and will tell you, is this camera running on an emulated screen, or is it running on an emulated device, or is the device jailbroken that you can feed it a stream from a computer-generated image. So one way is to do that, is to take control of the captcha, to make sure that nobody can inject videos or images of documents that don't really exist, that you've generated with Blender on a 3D environment. And the other way of doing that is to layer multiple types of security verifications. And what I'm thinking about here is NFC. So some chips can be hacked, but not all of them. And some, especially for the countries that share the security, the country signing certificates, then you can do a secret challenge response and tell that the chip has not been cloned and it is the original one. And that's an extra cost for a fraudster to invest into technology that could reproduce that, if you have that as an enforcement thing. Another option would be to use a subsequent check, such as a database check, in addition to the document check, so that you would run a watch list or an identity record search on the data that is created on the document. And I guess a third option would be to layer a liveness check as well, or sorry, a facial recognition check, because many times fraudsters would be hesitant to put their own faces into a document, and then if they have a false face that they can't match with their own visage and perform a challenge or some form of liveness authentication, then that would make it harder. So I guess 3 ways to tackle synthetic document fraud. That would be control your captcha, layer multiple types of checks like NFC databases and so on, and also add on a facial liveness or biometrics check, so that you can like prevent fraudsters or especially the privacy conscious fraudsters out there. Thank you for the question. It's a good one.
Thanks, Demi. I have another one for Interpol. How do you deal with the different standards across the globe, technical and ethical standards?
Good question, but it's really the secret of our success. I would say ability to bring together data, often critical data from 194 member countries, different systems, different countries, different circumstances, and we are very much used to dealing with the data in the way data owners demand from us. We are custodians of that information, and we apply the rules as per the historical recommendations. So we are very good in it. Interoperability is different thing. We don't have much impact if it's to do with standards. Regrettably, we like everybody else. But dealing with data, critical data coming from different environments, I feel we are very good because we have decades of experience.
Exactly, and thanks to our I-24/7 global police communication system, which is unique in the world. So we are able to exchange all information with member states within a second. So this is really something to be proud of.
For sure. Thank you. Simon. Now I need to pick the question for Simon. In relation to the portable identity, Simon, single identity versus creating new identities for each, let's say, bank account. Is the risk higher for this approach? Is it all or nothing?
I think that's almost a matter of perspective. I think if you have multiple accounts, then that's multiple opportunities for a fraudster to attack. So I would suggest that maybe having multiple accounts is creating a higher risk. I can see your argument, but at the same time, if you have a centralized, let's look at identity documents, for example. If I have a centralized issuing authority as opposed to multiple different issuing authorities, that means that as a fraudster, I only get one go at it. That means I only get one attack, as it were, which is easier to defend against. If I've got a centralized issuing body, then they can better control who's logging, who's creating the identity in the first place. So I tend to think, yeah, you could look at all or nothing. I tend to think of it as limiting the risk by a considerable amount. I think it's forcing people down a channel that makes it easier to manage. So I would tend to, certainly I think it's a safer way to go.
I want to jump in on that and say something else. I think that the all or nothing question is a bit moot because at this point, how many different email addresses do people largely use? And like if you have 7 or 70 bank accounts, they're all largely linked to one email address. So fraudsters would exploit the weakest chain in that system. And it doesn't matter that you use portable identity or different logins for 70 bank accounts because you probably have the same reset password for the same across all of them, which is linked to one account on your email. So that's something to take into account, that fraudsters will exploit the weakest link. And currently the weakest link is the fact that we can do very easily look at SIM swaps, where like the two-factor authentication code to reset your Gmail or whatever account goes to a phone, and that phone number can be easily manipulated. And that's where fraudsters would attack. They wouldn't go for the cryptographic portable identity match. They would hack your email first, and from there, exactly, all hell breaks loose.
Well, this is the kind of thing, shameless plug, but this is the kind of thing that Dimi and I talk about on our podcast. I did it. Moving on.
Shameless, Simon. Shameless. Due to time, I think we have time for 2 more questions. One more for Interpol, and this is a very interesting one. How comfortable is Interpol and/or law enforcement agencies using 2D verification instead of 3D? Going back from those 30, 40 security features, what we mentioned, to those 5 to 10 indicators. in relation to, for example, a database check?
Confidence level is lower, but sometimes we are in position to provide assistance, but there is no absolute guarantee, as you would well appreciate. So yes, it's very, very challenging. You yourselves admitted it's much more difficult. And in the past, I have to admit, we just flatly declined. There was not enough confidence in our opinion. As the time progresses and we learn more, yes, we can assist, but it's not something that we are yet very confident.
No, not yet. So something that we need to build on. Yes, Simon?
This is it. I was going to say, it's. I remember exactly that same position, Malik. It was. I remember flatly refusing if someone submitted a copy of a document. It's like, well, what can I do with that? But as you say, things have definitely moved forward, and I think the kind of partnership we've got here allows us to exchange that kind of the experience that we've gained doing what we do, and understanding where you guys are coming from. The whole point of our e-learning projects and everything else is, yeah, sharing it makes it possible for all of us to do it much better, I think.
A steep learning curve.
Pick the best out of it. And that's in addition to this question. I think that's a valid point. Only official databases would be able to confirm that a document is valid or not valid. And it's stating, I believe that any service must be linked to the official database government. It's not my statement. It's from one of the attendees. But I think it's a valid point. And that's the complete cooperation, what we are discussing. Of course, we would love to have access to Interpol's lost and stolen database with 80 million documents inside there. Yeah, that would be wonderful. But we will come there at a certain point in time. As long as all the people who are fighting the fraudsters are in the same direction, I think that's the first step we need to take. Yeah, I want to take on one more. Yes, Simon?
I was going to say, we've started to see this kind of thing happen as well. So you look at certain countries, like UK Passport Agency now is starting to come up with a private corporation-friendly version of their database so that you can find out limited amounts of information so that you can verify that a document is still valid. And I think that's what we'll start to see happen is watered-down versions, ones that are sort of, cleansed to a certain extent to make them more palatable for unauthorized personnel, shall we say. But yeah, I think it's definitely the way that the industry is starting to move.
I want to do one more question, and then it's time to call it an end for today. That's a question about a chip. There was no mention of reading the chip. Would it not be a higher level of identity insurance compared to security features? Now, I can answer that question as well. There's an interesting discussion going on about NFC reading. Is it something we need to do? In my opinion, we need to do it, but it's an additional check. It's not the holy grail as some companies or some people are stating. Why not, without going too deep into the material of the chip itself? Question one is, we need to authenticate the information on the chip. So are the personal details in the photo, are those authentic? Second question is, we need to authenticate the chip itself. The whole challenge here is that you need certain certificates, document certificates, country certificates, that need to be shared by the governments that are owning those identity documents. Just to mention, we have about 120 countries at the moment, I think, with documents that includes a chip in their document. And only 67 countries are sharing their country signer certificates, which means out of 60 countries, 60 documents, we can't even authenticate the chip itself. So is it a higher assurance? In my opinion, and I know the opinion of Dimi and Simon, they share the same opinion. It's not a better security, it's just an additional check. So we check security features, and in addition, we use that chip. Is it easier to extract data from a document on a chip? Yes, it is. But then again, the question, we need to know if that data is authentic or not. Is that chip authentic or not? Yeah, I think this is the end of today's webinar. I would like to thank Interpol again for your attendance and your participation. I hope in the future we can work on more projects. One project is still there. This year we would go to the US for a combined training again for police forces over there. Due to COVID, we are still sitting at home, but this is extended until 2021. So let's see what happens. And yeah, again, thank you, Simon, thank you, Dimi, and I would like to thank all the attendees. I saw the list of attendees, and most of them stayed until the end, so that's that's a very good sign. Nick, I think you can close it down, and I hope to see you all next time somewhere in the world, and otherwise, yeah, listen to us during one of our webinars.
Thank you.